Thus, when Sir Oswald Mosley was invited to come and speak at the Union, not 10 years after Auschwitz, I spoke out only in a very muted way against those who wanted to give him a platform. I remember in an article in Varsity, I denounced those who enjoyed the idea of, as I put it, plumping a piranha fish in the aquarium. I was too correct or too timid to indicate that I had any personal reason for not wanting that wily old troublemaker on the premises. Indeed, my determination to remain impersonal was, of course, very much in the Cambridge style. Academics, we should note, often speak of our reading, our investigation, and our conclusions. The deprecation of the first-person singular with all the emotionalism and autobiographical vanity it implies is, of course, actually very much part of the fascist style as well. The Duce or the Führer never speaks for himself, but always for the party, the people, the faith. Those who actually deplore the first-person pronoun are usually enemies of candor, and even sometimes of modesty. Cambridge, and especially Cambridge philosophy, encouraged me to believe that there could be a logical, hence an impersonal and unarguable rejection of the myths of Christianity and of all religious orthodoxies, including Judaism, which would make us free not only of moralizing cant, but of all kinds of murderous self-righteousness. The book that encapsulated this by no means silly or selfish idea was, of course, available in Tooting or Peckham, and it was, in fact, written in Oxford. But I read it here. My admiration for the terse author of Language, Truth and Logic remains undimmed, even by the news that he himself has repudiated most of its arguments, being a truthful, logical man. I confess that the positivistic idea still retains some hold on me. Only on what can be demonstrated to be universally true should universal conclusions be based. We cannot honestly claim as true, whatever poetic or moral qualities they may possess, any ideas based merely on conviction or principle or intuition or holy writ. Nor can we write warrants for cruelty or execution on the basis of their authority. See anything wrong with that? Ludwig Wittgenstein had retired as professor of philosophy, a post he never really wanted since he hated official dignities, in 1949. He died in Dr. Bevan's house in 1951 during my second year. I never saw or met him. I might have been a less fervent apostle, I suppose, if I had, though those who did know him remain bound by a veneration rare in a profession so fissile with feuds and factions. Stories about him circulated amongst us like those of the Master must have amongst the early Christians. His rooms were furnished with exemplary austerity. Sir Stafford Cripps himself was a sybarite by comparison. Wittgenstein gave away over £800,000 of his family inheritance, and he would sit, by choice, on nothing more comfortable than a deck chair. He was arrogant. He's once reported to have said to Bertrand Russell, "What do you know of philosophy, Russell? What have you ever known?" But he was also a man of bizarre, agonized modesty. Wittgenstein lived in Hewell's Court, Trinity, not far from my own college. His upstairs neighbour, an undergraduate, not only played the piano at all hours, but he played it rather poorly and what's more, out of tune. The Wittgensteins were a musical family. Ludwig's brother was a concert violinist. So it was suggested that he should simply forbid his neighbour to play during his seminars. In those days, one could pull rank. But Wittgenstein preferred a less aggressive solution, so he installed an electric fan in his rooms, which was tuned to drown the painful sounds from upstairs. Unfortunately, the fan also rendered Wittgenstein absolutely inaudible to his pupils, though they were much too much in awe of him to allude to the fact. Such stories which I'm quite determined to believe in, risk turning a genius who made Bertrand Russell seem like a mere talent into the very type of the absent-minded professor. But if Wittgenstein was, on some accounts at least, the most endearing character one never actually met, he also had a crucial influence on modern thought. And what I found liberating in his approach was a kind of systematic patience, a habit of critical dialogue at once severe and tolerant. G.E. Moore once said that he first realized that Wittgenstein was a remarkable man when, as a research student, Wittgenstein was the only man to look puzzled during Moore's lectures. In the therapeutic positivism which we sought to practice, one didn't brutally tell a man that he was wrong. One didn't swamp him with jargon or bludgeon him with quotations. One explored his thinking with him. One respected what he said, though one was, to say the least, disinclined to say it oneself. At least that was the theory. And a good one it was, too. And this doctrine of attention, of willingness to listen, of critical tolerance, has, I like to think, marked me rather more deeply than even the beauties of the place or the sugared memories of youth. It's in fact the heart of what Cambridge means to me. May I permit myself just one more anecdote about Wittgenstein? When he was dying of cancer, he was cared for by Dr. Bevan and his wife in their house. The process was rather lengthy, and Mrs. Bevan asked him what he liked for lunch. Oh, anything, he's said to have replied, as long as it's always the same thing. One day she cooked him something rather special, however, because it was his birthday. She baked a cake. Many happy returns, she said. The dying philosopher looked up. Would you care to rephrase that statement, he said. I hope the story is true, for it's both brave and philosophically interesting. Many happy returns is, as my teachers would surely have said, not a statement. Emotion unphilosophizes us all, which is where the novelist comes in. If Wittgenstein had no great philosophical consolations to offer his disciples, no afterlife, no Isles of the Blessed, no dictatorship of the professoriate, he did say one thing which for some reason I hope to find consoling in the face of the inevitable. It was this: death is not an event of life. It is not lived through. He led a life of dedication and anguish which even recent muckrakers haven't managed to disparage very badly. He was a lonely homosexual with a penchant for Betty Grable films. Make of that what you will, but not too much, I hope. His dying words are said to have been, "Tell them it's been wonderful." Cambridge was not for me always a matter of arguing deep into the night about the nature of propositions or whether facts were indeed irremediably wedded to that clauses. My self-imposed seclusion from theatrical activity was finally ended after I submitted a play to the Young Writers' Drama Competition. I didn't actually win, but the judges said nice things about my dialogue, of which I can only remember one line. One character said of another that he'd chased a girl all through the Olympic Games, and she fell at the last hurdle, was the witty rejoinder. I don't suppose they make young writers like that anymore. Well, clearly I was in a seller's market, and a buyer was not long in making his appearance. He was everything I wasn't. He'd come up a year later than I, but he was already far ahead of me in practical enterprise. He promised that I'd only to collaborate with him, and a glittering career in show business was ahead of me. I said I preferred to be an impoverished novelist, preferably living in Paris. My tiny hands were all set to be frozen. His were used to central heating. He'd read my play, he said, and he wanted to write with me. And who, I asked, is to be Beaumont, and who Fletcher? Never heard of them, he said, but I'll be Moss Hart and you'll be George Kaufman. Well, Kaufman was the American playwright who was once asked by a bridge partner who'd gone down in a cast-iron contract, "How should I have played it, partner?" "Under an assumed name," said Kaufman. "Okay," I said. "I'll be Kaufman for a while." The Footlights was an odd club with a rather limp-wristed reputation. We began to compose little sketches and savage satires which didn't really hurt anybody.
Evelyn Waugh.
Graham Greene.
The jealous all attack us.
But publishers paperback us.
We were nearly subjected to rape from that chap from Jonathan Cape. Victor Golantz.
No thanks.
Evelyn Waugh.
Graham Greene. It's God, God, God that keeps us always in season.
It's odd, two smart papists among the heathen.
England made me, Heinemann paid me. I'm the bore to end all bores.
Don't shoot religion. It's my pigeon. I'm the war to end all wars.
The ease with which one can be seduced by fool's gold and by real gold soon ceased to surprise me. I raced between the earnest language games of Cambridge philosophy and the rehearsed facetiousness of the kindergarten showbiz, with an energy that testified to my determination to have things both ways if I possibly could. Wit and Wittgenstein tugged the chariot of my soul, sense and sensuality with 2 bits between their teeth. My love-hate affair with showbiz began with the Footlights and with the musical comedy which my partner and I produced at the Arts Theatre. The musical was called Lady at the Wheel. Granta hated it, the Levisites loathed it, the aesthetes despised it. It was a smash hit. I never heard an audience laugh so much or cheer so loudly. I've never had a success that remotely equaled it. Kaufman and Hart? Rodgers and Hammerstein? Why not? The show was actually terribly corny, but it had rather pretty girls and really some very good songs, for which I took no credit whatever.
Wish I knew why I feel this way, why my heart has taken wings today, why my troubles like bubbles burst in the blue.
As a matter of fact, I took very little credit at all, despite my authorship of the book and my direction of the stage action. The credits had been supposedly agreed before, and my partner was to take a share for that of the book, since we'd worked out the rather ramshackle plot together. And I was to be given solo credit for directing the non-musical part of the piece, while he took a solo credit for directing the musical numbers. It seemed a verifiably reasonable arrangement. But when I first caught a sight of the freshly printed programs, I saw that a single heavily black-typed credit had been added to those which had already been agreed. It read, "The entire show devised and produced by," and there followed the solitary name of my partner and friend. I was not pleased. I'm a modest soul, but I was not at all pleased. He looked at my angry face and then at the program. "Bloody printers," he said. One learned a lot at Cambridge. Cambridge treated me with great generosity, my college especially. I remain grateful, but I'm not totally starry-eyed about Cambridge. There are cliques and feuds, there are unworthy prejudices and grotesque snobberies. But my abiding impression, just this side of sentimental, is of a great and good place I was damned lucky to come to. If the effect of tradition is in the end to make conservatives of us all, or at least conservationists, well, would you really want to replace this with a people's democratic, technologically efficient, de-ritualized, classless adjunct of the Ministry of Education? Am I a Cambridge writer? Well, don't ask for the meaning, ask for the use. Cambridge to me will always imply something of that careful, even implacable attention to nuance, without which conversation is mere rhetoric and art becomes merely propaganda. The writer doesn't, of course, ever really play fair, since he is the author. He is the petty divinity who rigs his own little universe. But true imagination gives even one's enemy a chance to declare himself, to make his best case. And by giving life to what's most hostile to oneself, one may even come to see where we are wrong and the hated other is right. At such moments, the writer can actually exult in the split in his personality and even possibly heal it, get it together, as they say. But not for too long, of course, or too quickly. For as Cavafy reminded us, Odysseus must not get to Ithaca too quickly, or where is the Odyssey? The writer can preen himself, he can bewail his lonely fate, he may celebrate the joy of life, or he may be endlessly aware of whatever his personal good fortune the agonies of men continue to endure. The great thing, however, is to write, and for my own opportunity to do that, Cambridge certainly deserves my thanks. Credit, of course, is another matter.
Oh, change will change at Cambridge. You have to change at Cambridge. You change your life at Cambridge, and you'll agree it's swell. This life is